In this video, we'll discuss Section 1 of Chapter 9, Orbital Hybridization. We will be discussing what sp, sp2, and sp3 means in terms of orbital hybridization. When atomic orbitals combine together, we get hybrid orbitals. These hybrid orbitals are identical in shape and energy, as opposed to the atomic orbitals, which have different shapes and slightly different energies. The three orbital hybridizations we're going to talk about are sp3, sp2, and sp, and each one is associated with a different molecular shape. So why do orbitals hybridize? When orbitals hybridize, we can get more atoms to bond with our central atom. That lowers the energy, the bonds are more stable, and the atoms themselves can be farther apart from one another. Let's start with sp3 hybridization. This is when we combine 1s and 3p orbitals. So that's 4 atomic orbitals, and we get 4 hybrid orbitals that are now identical in shape and energy. We usually will see this type of hybridization with a tetrahedral shape. So something like methane, a carbon bonded to 4 hydrogens with 4 hybrid orbitals gives us that tetrahedral shape, as you see here. Here's how it works. Let's think about that central atom carbon. Carbon has 4 valence electrons. There would be 2 electrons in the 2s and 1 electron in each of 2 different 2p orbitals. That means that 2 things could potentially come in and bond. But in that molecule, CH4, methane, that we saw on the previous slide, there are 4 hydrogens that have bonded with the carbon. And so we explain that through orbital hybridization. The combination of the 2s and the 3 different 2p orbitals gives us 4 of these sp3 hybrid orbitals. 1 electron can go into each hybrid orbital, and then that creates 4 opportunities for bonding. So 4 hydrogens could come in and bond and bring their electron to share with the carbon. Here you can see what the 4 sp3 hybrid orbitals look like after the s and p atomic orbitals have been combined. And here's what that methane molecule looks like with the 4 sp3 hybrid orbitals. And here is the 1s orbital from each of the hydrogen atoms, bringing in its electron to share with the carbon electrons. sp2 hybridization is when we combine together 1s and 2p orbitals. This is usually associated with a trigonal planar shape. There is 1p orbital that is not hybridized or not used, and that can be particularly important if we are having double or triple bonds within a molecule, like this molecule below. Each carbon in the ethylene molecule has the trigonal planar shape. And when we see that, we say that the carbon is sp2 hybridized. With sp hybridization, we combine together 1s and 1p orbital. 2p orbitals are not used or not hybridized, and we usually associate sp hybridization with a linear shape. For example, in carbon dioxide, we see this linear shape, and we would say that the carbon is sp hybridized. Carbon dioxide also has 2 double bonds. Let's discuss that a little bit more thoroughly. Whenever we have a single covalent bond, we call that a sigma bond. This is where the electron pair is shared between the 2 atoms. However, in a molecule like carbon dioxide, where we have 2 double bonds, we would say that we have 1 sigma bond and then 1 pi bond for each of those double bonds. A pi bond occurs when you have double or triple bonds, and the electron sharing is not between the atoms, it's in the space above and below the sigma bond. And that is where those unhybridized p orbitals come into play. That's how we're actually able to share 2 or 3 pairs of electrons. So here is that carbon dioxide molecule again. Here are the 2 different hybrid orbitals that the carbon has. So carbon is sp hybridized. And then you can see some overlap with some atomic orbitals from the oxygen. And then carbon also has some unhybridized p orbitals. So there's 1 and 2. And that's the foundation of the pi bonds that we have within the carbon dioxide molecule. So you can see the sigma bonds are labeled with those dark green hybrid orbitals, and then the pi bonds are shown just kind of as an attraction here. So that's one pi bond, and then the other pi bond is over here. And so one of the things we want to be able to do is identify how many sigma bonds and how many pi bonds we have within a molecule. We would say that we have 2 sigma bonds in a carbon dioxide molecule. So we'll count those as the 2 single bonds. And then once we get that double bond going on each side of the carbon, we would say we have 2 pi bonds. So this is what you need to know. sp hybridization is associated with a linear geometry and shape. sp2 hybridization, trigonal planar geometry and shape. sp3 hybridization, tetrahedral geometry and shape. Pause the video here and draw the Lewis dot structures for each of these molecules. Determine the bond angle and then the hybridization of the central atom for each of those molecules. For the NH3, this is ammonia. Here's the Lewis dot structure. This is a tetrahedral geometry pyramidal shape. The bond angle would be a little bit less than 109.5, just slightly due to that electron pair repulsion. And since this is a tetrahedral geometry, we would say that the hybridization is sp3 on the nitrogen. For the SO2, this is sulfur dioxide. I drew only one of the resonance structures. That's all we really need for this. This is a trigonal planar geometry with a bent or angular shape. The bond angle would be about 120 degrees, maybe a little bit less due to that electron pair repulsion. And since this is trigonal planar, the orbital hybridization would be sp2 on the sulfur.